Well, shalom, everyone, and welcome to our Torah study, lesson 13 of 52 lessons that will get us through the first 5 books of the Bible called the Torah, or Book of Instructions. And we are excited about all that Jehovah is doing in the lives of his people. We are excited to get back into our Torah studies as well. For faith comes by hearing, and hearing the word. So the more we go into this word and the more we study it, the more our trust in the creator of the universe will manifest itself in our lives. And this is our Shabbat night study. And we are excited because Jehovah, our Elohim, made the Sabbath and set it apart way back in the book of Genesis in the story of creation. And Yeshua, his son, came and reminded us of the importance of the Sabbath. And so, since it was created just for us to remind us and the world that there is a creator in Genesis 1:1, and we serve that creator. And so we are excited because wherever you are obedient, blessings come. And so since the Sabbath was created for man, we want to go into the Sabbath because the days begin in Genesis with the evening and then the morning. So the beginning of the 7th day starts on Friday evening and ends on Saturday evening. So since it was created just for us, we choose to honor it and receive the blessings of the creator of the universe, our maker. So we are excited. We're in this book of Exodus. We use this music just to get our hearts and mind ready to receive what the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, that was given, the very Spirit of truth that was given to each one of the believers to guide us into all truth. And so our music is over, and we are going to begin our study in Hebrew. It's titled Shemot. And Shemot means, as we will notice, Shemot means names. And as we begin this study, titled after the first words of this particular study, we'll say these are the names. That's the word Shemot. And we use that because that theme will run continually, names. And we're going to see one of the most important names of these first 5 books, and that is Moshe, or Moses. And so we'll see that follow throughout these first 5 chapters and then the first verse of chapter 6. Remember that chapters and verses were added much later to the scrolls, or to the books, basically, that enable us to better study from a position of being able to find a particular place in the Torah or in the Bible that we can all read together. Now, the readers and the people at the time the temple was standing, remember, they memorized most of this. And so for them, they could go to a place on the scroll, just a scroll, many scrolls that were later combined to make what is called the Tanakh in Hebrew, which is what we call in English the Old Testament. The Tanakh consists of the Torah, the writings, Nevi'im, and the Torah, then the prophets, Nevi'im, and then Ketuvim, which is the writing. So those three came together to make up the word for the Old Testament, which is the Tanakh. And so we are excited that we get an opportunity to continue on our journey to get through these 52 books in 1 year's time. And we do it by dividing it up into the sections that the Hebrew people the scholars have divided it up to make certain that we can complete this particular task that we set out to do. Remember that the Torah, first 5 books, is the foundation for all the scriptures. And so with that, we're going to pray, and then we're going to get into our study on tonight. Jehovah our Elohim, we bless you for this day. This is the day that you have made. We rejoice, we are glad in it. We thank you for the Ruach HaKodesh that has been provided to guide us into all truth. Thank you for opening up our hearts and minds to receive all that you will speak to us on tonight through your instructions, your Torah. We bless you for it. We thank you for Yeshua HaMashiach, for as we study the redemption of the children of Israel from the bondage of Mizraim or Egypt to a life and a land flowing with milk and honey. We thank you for the Ruach HaKodesh as he guides us through this lesson, opening our hearts and minds to receive all that you would say. In the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, we pray. Amen. Okay, so with that, we're going to get to our shared screen, and we're going to get to our lesson on tonight. And we're going to get to our slideshow presentation. And it begins. What happened? It didn't register. Okay, there we are. Now our slideshow presentation begins. I'm going to go up into the right-hand corner of your screen. You will hear me and see this small picture of me, but you're going to see the words so that we can go through these words together. All right? So we are in the book titled Shemot. In English, it is Exodus, because that is what transpires throughout this particular lesson for sure, and then throughout the journeys of the children of Israel to the land of promise. So with that, Shemot is the Hebrew, and it means names. Names. So let us get into a little bit of our introduction. This week's Torah reading, remember, Torah is the Hebrew word for the first 5 books of the Bible. After that, our understanding of what transpires next shifts a little bit as it was taken from the Hebrew perspective to a more English or Greek and Latin perspective, and then English. So we will find that the order in the Tanakh for the Hebrew people was, like I said, the Torah, then the prophets, both minor and major, and then the writings. And so that's how the book was divided up. The English way that the Bible has come together can be very confusing, whereas we will find that if we looked at it from that Hebrew perspective, we would see more of an orderly development of all of the text. So it's going to begin in this book of Exodus. It's going to talk about, as we say, Moshe. Moses in English is born and raised and later raised in an Egyptian royal palace. This is why the scriptures say he was very well versed in all the knowledge of the Egyptians, because for the first 40 years of his life, that is what he studied, as Pharaoh's daughter took him in and raised him in the royal palace. A lot to be said about that. All right. After killing an Egyptian as an adult, Moses escapes to Midian and marries one of the daughters of the priest, Jethro. Jehovah appears, so we're going to get this name Jehovah now in this particular study. Once again, it's titled Names. And so we're going to see the name given to Moses of Jehovah. It appears to him in a burning bush and demands that he return to Egypt to redeem the Israelites. After saying several times that he could not do the task, Moses accepts, and then Moses returns, starting off with his family, but probably not ending up with his family, with a wife and 2 sons. He returns to Egypt with the intention of Jehovah freeing the people of Israel through him. And so now we're going to get into this whole story and how it develops. And you can take your Bible out if you want to make notes in the margins or whatever that is. You can do that. So now we're going to go, it's going to show up on the screen, and it starts. These are the names. This is Exodus 1:1. These are the what? Names. So that's where we get the word Shemot, which is the title of this section of study that we're about to embark upon. So we see then that, I don't know why this came up, but it shouldn't have. Let's go back and get it done. Names of the sons of Israel who came into Egypt with Jacob or Jacob. Each man came with his household. These are the sons of Jacob that became the 12 tribes of Israel: Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. All told, there were 70 descendants of Jacob or Jacob, because Joseph was already in Egypt. He's the one that invited them. We studied in the book of Bereshit or Genesis. Joseph died, as did all his brothers and all that generation. So now these are the descendants of these. Basically, we found there were 70 in total, the families of Jacob that came into Egypt and lived in a land which we're going to see down here in our lesson for today. The descendants of Israel were fruitful, increased abundantly, multiplied, and grew very powerful, meaning in number. The land became filled with them. Now there arose a new king over Egypt. He knew nothing of Joseph, but said to his people, look. So he doesn't know anything about Joseph, doesn't care anything about it. He is from the descendants of the Pharaoh, and he has decided that they are too powerful. Look, the descendants of Israel has become a people too numerous and powerful for us. So basic word, once again, names. Come, let's use wisdom in dealing with them. Are they going to use wisdom in dealing with these people who have become too much in number? I can't get rid of that. All right. So he goes on, otherwise they'll continue to multiply. Verse 10, and in the event of war, they might ally themselves with our enemies, fight against us, and leave the land altogether. So now that's an interesting thing, using wisdom, and that is that we're going to keep them here. Sounds familiar to the people of Africa that were kidnapped and brought to this land. And he said, but we don't want them to leave. Why? We need that labor. A theme that runs throughout this. Then he goes on and he says, verse 11, so they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor. And they built for Pharaoh the storage cities of Pithom and Ramesses. Now, Ramesses is the land that under Joseph, the children of Israel were given that land by Pharaoh because it's a land of plenty. And they were put in that land, and now they fulfill the land that they were given. So they're now building storage cities. So they're going to take everything they have and store it, but they're not going to give them access to it. Sounds very familiar. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more they multiplied and expanded, until the Egyptians came to dread the people of Israel and worked them relentlessly. Sounds very familiar. That's why for what we call African Americans, this story is so much more meaningful because of the fact that this is the way our ancestors were treated in the land for which we presently live. They had what? Making their lives bitter with hard labor, digging clay, making bricks, all kinds of field work, and in all this toil, they were shown no mercy. We go to verse 15. Moreover, the king of Egypt, meaning the Pharaoh, spoke to the Hebrew midwives. This doesn't really explain to us whether they were Hebrew or just midwives of the Hebrew, one of whom was called Shiphrah and the other Huah. So these women were head over all of, the midwives that would deliver babies in the land of Egypt. He says, when you attend the Hebrew women and see them giving birth, he said, meaning Pharaoh, if it's a boy, kill him. But if it's a girl, let her live. However, the midwives were God-fearing women. So in other words, this is a ruling that they refused to adhere to. So they didn't do as the king of Egypt ordered, but let the boys live. Verse 18, the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and demanded of them, why have you done this and let the boys live? The midwives answered Pharaoh, it's because the Hebrew women aren't like the Egyptian women. They go into labor and give birth before the midwife arrives. We highlighted that because during this period of slavery in this nation, the very same thing would happen. These women would give birth, and most of the time it was the what? An African-American midwife that would in fact deliver the children of both the slaves and of the slaveholders' wives themselves. Therefore, God prospered the midwives, and the people continued to multiply and grow very powerful. Indeed, because the midwives feared Elohim, he made them founders of families. So they began to get very wealthy, being blessed of God for being obedient to Elohim or to God. And so then Pharaoh says, okay, this is the order to all his people. Every boy of a Hebrew that is born, throw in the river, but let all the girls live. So once again, we're going to see this river that we're going to find out is the Nile River that they were going to throw all these babies into. We're going to find out that that's where a whole lot of the plagues in the beginning and the end come from, to deal with Pharaoh and his people for what they had desired to do but were kept from doing it by the hand of Jehovah. So we go into chapter 2. A man from the family of Levi took a woman, also descended from Levi, as his wife. Remember, Levi was one of the sons of Yaakov, right? So a man from the family of Levi took a woman and also descended from the family of Levi, which is going to become the priestly class, as his wife. When she conceived and had a son, upon seeing what a fine child he was, she hid him for 3 months. When she could no longer hide him, she took a papyrus basket, coated it with clay and tar, put the child in it, and placed it among the reeds on the river bank. We're going to find that the sister of this child was one of the slaves of Pharaoh's daughter. And so the whole putting him in the basket and all of that probably came from her to make sure that he would be saved and wouldn't be thrown into the river. So she stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the river, while her maids and attendants walked along the river's side. So this sister, which we're going to find out is Miriam, watched and saw that her plot or her thoughts concerning this were going to take place. Spotting the basket among the reeds, she sent her slave girl to get it. There we go, once again. She opened it and looked inside, and there in front of her was a crying baby boy. Moved with pity, the hand of Jehovah is working in this situation. She said, "This must be one of the Hebrews' children." Why she designated it as a Hebrew child could be the fact that on the 8th day, for a Hebrew male, they were circumcised. But for an Egyptian baby, they would not be circumcised necessarily on the 8th day, as it was a rite of passage that took place later. And so she says this must be one of the Hebrew children. So obviously the child looks just like Pharaoh's daughter in the sense of ethnicity. Even though it was a Hebrew, it looked just like the Egyptians. At this point, his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Would you like me to go and find you one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" All right, so now she had this plan. Verse 4, she watches it come into existence. Verse 5, she goes and gets the basket for the daughter of Pharaoh. And verse 7, she says, "I will go and find a woman to nurse the baby for you." Pharaoh's daughter answered, "Yes, go." So the girl went and called the baby's own mother, meaning the mother of the child, which is also the mother of Miriam. Pharaoh's daughter told her, "Take this child away." Says this to Jochebed, which is the mother of Moshe, "and nurse it for me, and I will pay you for doing it." So the woman took the child and nursed it. So the very mother of Moshe is now nursing him and instructing him for probably the first 3 years of his life. And she's getting, not only was he not killed, but she's getting paid for doing it. Then when the child had grown some, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and then Pharaoh's daughter began to raise him as her son. She called him Moshe, or Moses, meaning pulled out, explaining, "Because I pulled him out of the water." So there's various groups of study about this name. Was it an Egyptian name or a Hebrew name? Well, she called him Moshe, basically making us believe that it was an Egyptian name. We don't know what name the parents may have had for him, but one of the things about the name is getting that personal with the child might have made the whole situation. Moses' mother probably had a pet name or a name she called him, but it wasn't a name that she wanted known, because this baby was going to be raised by Pharaoh's daughter in the palace. Verse 11. One day now Moses is a grown man. So it skipped through all those 40 years of his life. And then in verse 11, one day when Moshe was a grown man, he went out to visit his kinsmen. So we'll find out later, he was about 40 years old. And he watched them struggling at forced labor. He saw an Egyptian strike a Hebrew, one of his kinsmen. He looked this way and that, and when he saw that no one was around, he then killed the Egyptian and hid his body in the sand. So now he goes over and chastises the Egyptian, which wasn't something he was supposed to do as an Egyptian, but he did it anyway, right? So he's now taking things into his own hand. The next day, he went out and saw two Hebrew men fighting with each other. To the one in the wrong, he said, "Why are you hitting your companion?" He retorted, "Who appointed you ruler and judge over us? Do you intend to kill me the way you killed the Egyptian?" Moshe became frightened. Clearly, he thought the matter has become known. So in other words, if this man knows and has spread the rumor that this is what has transpired, Moses got to get out of town. When Pharaoh, verse 15, when Pharaoh heard of it, he tried to have Moshe put to death. But Moshe had fled from Pharaoh to live in the land of Midian. Very interesting thing, that land of Midian, because what you can find if you study this name or go through a study of this name, the wife of Abraham after the death of Sarah was Keturah. And one of the children of Keturah and Abraham was a child named Midian. And so therefore, we can trace that name back to Abraham and his wife, Keturah. One day as he was sitting by a well, so he's gone into the land of Midian now, running for his life, the 7 daughters of the priest of Midian came to draw water. We'll find out his name was Jethro among his names. But he was what? He was a priest of Midian. They had filled the troughs to water their father's sheep when the shepherds came and tried to drive them away. But Moshe got up and defeated them. Then he watered their sheep. When they came to Reuel, their father is also called Jethro. This is his Midianite name. He said, "How come you're back so soon today?" They answered, an Egyptian. Something about Moses identified him as an Egyptian, but he looked like the Midians as well. Rescued us from the shepherds. More than that, he drew water for us and watered the sheep. Now we see sheep. So Moses is going to become what? The shepherd over the sheep and also the shepherd over the children of Israel as he guides them to the fulfillment of their redemption. So Reuel asked his daughters, "Where is he? Why did you leave the man there? Invite him to have something to eat." Moshe was glad to stay on with the man. And he gave Moshe his daughter Zipporah in marriage. She gave birth to a son, and he named him Gershom, which means foreigner there. For he said, I have been a foreigner in a foreign land. So now he's talking about in both places, right? Both Egypt and Midian. He has become a foreigner, where he was in line to be being accepted as Pharaoh's daughter, he was in line to be in line of being a Pharaoh or part of the royalty. Sometime during those many years, the king of Egypt died, but the people of Israel still groaned under the yoke of slavery. So sometime during the time between the birth of his son and his time in the land of Midian, Pharaoh dies. But the edict to make them slaves work hard was maintained because it was for the benefit of the people of Egypt. Elohim heard their groaning, not as if he never heard it, but now he's getting ready to bring about the plan for redemption. And Elohim remembered his covenant with Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Elohim saw the people of Israel, and Elohim acknowledged them. Elohim saw means that he's getting ready to do what he spoke to Abraham and Isaac, to Abraham that he would do, that they would go into a foreign land, but that he would bring them out of that land. So now he's ready to implement that part of the plan of Jehovah. So we go on. Chapter 3. Now, Moshe was tending the sheep of Jethro or Reuel, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, leading the flock to the far side of the desert. He came to the mountain of God called Horeb. The angel of Jehovah appeared to him in a fire, blazing from the middle of a bush. He looked and saw that although the bush was flaming with fire, yet the bush was not being burned up or consumed. Moshe said, I'm going to go over and see this amazing sight and find out why the bush isn't being burned up. When Jehovah saw that he had gone over to see, Elohim called to him from the middle of the bush, Moshe, Moshe. He answered, here I am. He said, meaning Jehovah, don't come any closer. Take your sandals off your feet, because the place where you are standing is holy ground. I am the Elohim of your father, he continued, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Yitzhak, and the Elohim of Yaakov. Moshe covered his face because he was afraid to look at Elohim. The bush was very bright. So not only was he afraid to look at it, but it was probably so bright that it was hurting Moshe's eyes. Jehovah said, I have seen how my people are being oppressed in Egypt and heard their cry for release from their slave masters, because I know their pain. I have come down to rescue them from the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that country to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amori, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Yes, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have seen how terribly the Egyptians oppressed them. Therefore, now come, and I will send you to Pharaoh so that you can lead my people, the descendants of Israel, out of Egypt. So the very thing that Jehovah told Abraham that he was going to do, the time for him to do that is at hand. Told him that they would suffer some oppression. After a time, they would suffer oppression. But he was going to go get them and bring them back to the land. And when they come back to the land this time, they're going to take it because he has given it to them for the time of these people. The Canaanites, the Hivites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, Jebusites, or Jebusi, yes, the cry of the people has come to him. In other words, it's time to fulfill what I have said that I would do. Moshe said to Elohim, look, when I appear before the people of Israel and say to them, the Elohim of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What am I to tell them? So remember, he was raised under all the understanding of the Egyptians. And then for a long period of time, he had been under what? The tutelage of Reuel. So he wants to know, okay, all of these, I understand that there is Elohim, there is a creator, a divine being, but what name does this being have that I'm going to tell them? Elohim said to Moshe, Eye, Asher, Eye. I am will be what I am will be. So in other words, there's no beginning, I'll be whatever I need to be and add it. Here is what to say to the people of Israel. So now he's giving him an explanation of who he is. This is an explanation, but not his name. Eye, I am or I will be, has sent me to you. Eye, Asher, Eye. Elohim said further to Moshe, say this to the people of Israel. Yud He Vav He. That's the tetrahedrogram. That's the four letters Yud He Vav and He. YHVH. He says his name, he spells out his name, Yehovah. The Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Yitzhak, and the Elohim of Yaakov has sent me to you. This is my name. This is not his title, he says. This is my name forever to you. This is how I am to be remembered generation after generation. Go gather the leaders of Israel together and say to them, Yehovah, Yehovah, the Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Yitzhak, and Yaakov, has appeared to me and said, I have been paying close attention to you and have seen what is being done to you in Egypt. And I have said that I will lead you up out of the misery of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusi, to a land flowing with milk and honey. They will heed what you say. Then you will come. So at some point, they are going to heed what Moshe tells them. Then you will come, you and the leaders of Israel, before the king of Egypt, and you will tell him, Yehovah, the Elohim of the Hebrews, has met with us. Now, please let us go 3 days' journey into the desert so that we can sacrifice to Jehovah, our Elohim. But he's telling them, this is the name you're going to tell Pharaoh as well, so that Pharaoh will understand. The most powerful nation on the earth will understand who this is. And we'll find that Pharaoh begins to use that name when he refers to this Elohim of the Hebrews. So then he goes in verse 19, he says, I know that the king of Egypt will not let you leave unless he is forced to do so. But I will reach out my hand and strike Egypt with all my wonders that I will do there. After that, he will let you go. Moreover, so he's saying it's going to be a process. Redemption is a process for everyone involved. He goes on. Moreover, verse 21, I will make the Egyptians so well disposed toward this people that when you go, you won't go empty-handed. Rather, all the women will ask their neighbors and house guests for silver, gold jewelry, and clothing, with which you will dress your own sons and daughters. In this way, you will plunder the Egyptians. So now he's giving him an understanding of how this is all going to take place, but not explaining it fully. But he said, I'm going to show my wonders. to Egypt. So Egypt is going to recognize, who is this Jehovah? We go on. Verse chapter 4. Moshe replied. Now this is amazing, because Moshe replied, but I'm certain they won't believe me. He remembers what he did them many years ago, 40 or so years ago, that he did, and he had to run for his life. He said they didn't listen to him then. And he said they won't listen to what I say, because they'll say Jehovah did not appear to you. So just as he tried to deliver them before, because they were Hebrews, they rejected him, and he had to run for his life and go into the land of Midian. Jehovah answered him, what is that in your hand? And Moses said, a staff. He said, throw it on the ground. And Moshe threw it on the ground. It turned into a snake, and Moshe recoiled from it. He jumped back from it. Then Jehovah said to Moshe, put your hand out and take it by the tail. So now he's running from a snake or a serpent, and he told him to take hold of that snake. So Moses reaches out his hand and takes hold of the snake. This is so that they will believe that Jehovah, the Elohim of their fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Yitzhak, and the Elohim of Yaakov has appeared to you. Furthermore, Jehovah said to him, Moshe, now put your hand inside your coat. Moshe puts his hand in his coat, and when he took out his hand, it was leprous, as white as snow. So obviously, that was not the color of his skin before he put it there. Then Elohim said, now put your hand back in your coat. So he puts his hand back. He put his hand back in his coat. And when he took it out, it was as healthy as the rest of his body. If they won't believe you, verse 8, or heed the evidence of the first sign, they will be convinced by the second. But if they aren't persuaded, even by both these signs, and still won't listen to what you say, then take some water from the river and pour it on the ground. The water you take from the river will turn into blood on the dry lands. So now he's got 3 signs of what he can do that's going to help not only the people believe him, but help Moses go into confidence that this is going to happen, because he has to go in confidence. Moshe then says to Jehovah, oh, Jehovah, I am a terrible speaker. I always have been, and I'm no better now. Even after you've spoken to your servant, my words come slowly. My tongue moves slowly. So you see, kind of like he has a stammering or some kind of speech impairment. Jehovah answered him. Listen to what Jehovah says to Moshe. Who gives a person a mouth? And he's putting all these things in perspective for Moshe. I gave you a mouth. Who makes a person dumb or deaf, keen-sighted or blind? Isn't it I, Jehovah? So the creator of the universe is saying, I made your mouth. You don't think I can make you speak well before these people? Now, therefore, go, and I will be your mouth and will teach you what to say. However, Moshe replied, what happened to my notes? Verse 13. Okay, I'm in the right spot. Okay, but he replied, please, Lord, Lord being master, send someone else, anyone you want. At this, Jehovah's anger blazed up against Moshe. He said, don't you have a brother, Aharon, the Levite or Levi? I know that he's a good speaker. In fact, here he is now coming out to meet you, and he'll be happy to see you. So Moshe is given a vision of his brother Aharon coming out to see him when he gets back to Egypt. Jehovah says, you will speak to him, and put the words in his mouth, and I will be your mouth and his, teaching you both what to do. Thus, he will be your spokesman to the people, in effect, for you. He's going to speak for you. He will be a mouth, and for him, you will be like God, like a God. Now, take this staff in your hand, because you need it to perform the signs. With this, verse 18, Moshe left, returned to Yithro, his father, now he's Jethro or Reuel, his father-in-law, and said to him, I beg you to let me go and return to my kinsmen in Egypt to see if they are still alive. So he's telling his father-in-law, allow me to go. Now, Jehovah's already told him to go. So I assume he could tell Jethro, this is what's getting ready to happen. So this is part of what Jethro's understanding is. Jethro said to Moshe, go in peace. You have my permission to go. He's going to take his wife and children. Jehovah said to Moshe in Midian, go on back to Egypt. This is what he told him to do, because all the men who wanted to kill you are dead. So Moshe took his wife and sons, put them on a donkey, and started out for Egypt. Moshe took Elohim's staff in his hand. Jehovah said to Moshe, when you get back to Egypt, make sure that you do before Pharaoh every one of the wonders I have enabled you to do. This kind of goes into our purpose. When we have a purpose, Jehovah prepares us for that purpose. So everything that we need has already been given to us, but there's a process of receiving and actually doing what we have been called to do. He says, nevertheless, I am going to make him hard-hearted. So now he's telling him, Pharaoh going to be hard. He ain't going to want to do this. And he will refuse to let the people go. Then you ought to tell Pharaoh, Jehovah says, Israel is my firstborn son. I have told you to let my son go in order to worship me, but you have refused to let him go. Well, then I will kill your firstborn son. So it's going to get to the point. Now, this is like the 10th or the last of the plagues, but he's already informing Moshe that it's going to be rough, but this is where it's going to end up. Now, Moshe didn't go right in there and tell Pharaoh he's going to kill you. No, there was a process to do all the wonders, every one of the wonders, because there's a point being made by Jehovah to not only the people of Egypt, but to mankind per se. All of these false things you have come to worship are just that. They are false. So now he's revealing to him that finally, he says, your firstborn son will be killed, meaning Pharaoh. Then, fascinating part, at a lodging place on the way, Jehovah met Moshe and would have killed him. Now, Moshe is going to write this later at the understanding that Jehovah gives him. This is what Moshe said, he would have killed me had not Zipporah taken a flintstone and cut off the foreskin of her son. So evidently Moshe had not circumcised both of his sons. Well, how you going to go tell the Jews you from Jehovah, and the covenant for Jehovah is based on circumcision? So she says, she threw it at his feet saying, what a bloody bridegroom you are for me. But then Elohim let Moshe be. She added, a bloody bridegroom because of the circumcision. So even though Moses had a task to do, there was something that needed to be done before he got there. Circumcising his children. He had not done that. Now, It is believed that at this point, remember, when there is circumcision, that child or that adult, whatever age this young man was when he was circumcised, is in great pain. So more than likely, he was left there with his mother while Moshe went on to take care of their business. And we'll find out later that her father then brings her to Moshe after the children of Israel had been let go from Egypt. Jehovah said to Aharon, now Jehovah telling Aharon, go into the desert to meet Moshe. He went, met him at the mountain of Elohim, and kissed him. So now Aharon goes to meet Moses as he is entering into Egypt. Moshe told him everything Jehovah had said in sending him, including all the signs he had ordered him to perform. Then Moshe and Aaron went and gathered together all the leaders of the people of Israel. Aharon said everything Jehovah had told Moshe, who then performed the signs for the people to see. The people believe. These are the leaders of the people. When they see these three signs, they believe. When they heard that Jehovah had remembered the people of Israel, ready to move and see how they were oppressed, they bowed their heads and worshiped. Chapter 5. After that, Moshe and Aharon came and said to Pharaoh, here is what Jehovah, the Elohim of Israel, he tells them who this God is, who this Elohim is of Israel says. Let my people go so they can celebrate a festival in the desert to honor me. But Pharaoh replied, is Jehovah, that I should obey when he says to let Israel go. I don't know Jehovah, and I also won't let Israel go. They said, the Elohim as the Hebrews has met with us. Please let us go 3 days' journey into the desert so that we can sacrifice to Jehovah our Elohim. Now he told them exactly what Jehovah had told him. Otherwise, they add, he may strike us with a plague or with the sword. The king of Egypt answered them, Moshe and Aharon, what do you mean by taking the people away from their work? Get back to your labor. Look, Pharaoh added, the population of the land has grown, yet you are trying to have them stop working. That same day, Pharaoh ordered the slave masters and the people's foremen, you are no longer to provide straw for the bricks the people are making, as you did before. Let them go and gather straw for themselves, but you will require them to produce the same quantity of bricks as before. Don't reduce it, because they're lazying around. This is why they're crying, let us go and sacrifice to our Elohim. So he didn't have any problem with them worshiping some other God other than the Elohim of the Egyptians. He didn't have a problem with that, but he wasn't about to, in his own mind, he runs everything. We find that the same thing that was told to Yeshua before his crucifixion. Remember, he told Yeshua that, don't you know I got the power to let you go or not let you go? Yeshua said, you don't have no power. That came from my Father. So we see then that the world will then, in their challenge of Jehovah, will increase persecution. We go on. Verse 10. The people's slave masters went out, their foreman too, and said to the people, here's what Pharaoh says. I will no longer give you straw. You go yourselves and get straw wherever you can find it, but your output is not to be reduced. So the people were dispersed throughout all the land of Egypt to gather stubble for straw. The slave masters kept pressing them. Keep working. Make your daily quota, just as when straw was provided. The foreman of the people of Israel, all right, so now these are what we would call those that were Hebrews that were put in charge of making sure that things went, giving them a little status position. Malcolm called it the house Negro, giving them a position of overseeing the work of others. But look what happened to them. They were flogged and asked, why haven't you filled your quota of bricks yesterday and today as you did formerly? Then the foreman of the people of Israel came and complained to Pharaoh, why are you treating your servants this way? No straw is given to your servants, yet they keep telling us to make bricks. And now your servants are being flogged. But the fault lies with your own people. Lazy, Pharaoh retorted. You're just lazy. That's why you say, let us go and sacrifice to Jehovah. Get going now and get back to work. No straw will be given to you, and you will still deliver the full amount of bricks. When they said, you are not to reduce your daily production quota of bricks, the foreman of the people of Israel could see that they were in deep trouble. So now here come Moshe and Aaron telling them he's getting ready to get them free, but so far things are not working as they thought they would, which is what happens in many cases with us fulfilling our purpose. We get to the end and we see the end of things, but that process that is doing things in the manner in which Jehovah, that process which Jehovah has designed, you have to go through. The people's slave master went out, and we close with this verse 20. As they were leaving Pharaoh, they encountered Moshe and Aaron standing by the road. And they said to them, may Jehovah look at you and judge accordingly, because you have made us utterly abhorrent in the view of Pharaoh and his servants. And you have put a sword in their hands to kill us. They are beating us to death, and they will kill us with the sword if we don't meet our quota. Moshe returned to Jehovah. That means he went somewhere to pray and said, Jehovah, why have you treated this people so terribly? What has been the value of sending me? For ever since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, using that name Jehovah, he has dealt terribly with this people. And you haven't rescued your people at all. Now, Jehovah already told him that he was going to deal with it, that Pharaoh wasn't going to want to let him go, and he was going to deal with him harshly, and then it was going to end up where he would kill his firstborn sons. All of this will transpire before you can go. But a lot of times we get to the end of the story and don't want to read back everything else that's going to transpire, which is a natural thing that men will do. We want relief right now and don't care how it has to come. Chapter 6, verse 1, Jehovah said to Moshe, now you will see what I am going to do to Pharaoh. With a mighty hand, he will send them off. With force, he will drive them from the land. And so that concludes our lesson for today. So we can see then that the story of redemption, this plan of Jehovah to free the children of Israel from the bondage of slavery. Now, we want to understand how that affects us today. Well, we're all, because of the sin of our foreparents, meaning Adam and Eve, because of their disobedience, then they were kicked out of the garden and placed in a land with thorns and thistles, or there's going to be hard times. Then you're going to work this land much differently than this utopia I had planned for you, where you just, everything was growing. Yeah, you're going to pick up some weeds here and there, but everything is growing and plentiful. But you decided to let that go. So you then divided yourself from me. And in doing that, you lost your connection with me in a direct, connected way, and I have to bring you back into right standing with me. Didn't tell him. All he said is someone will come to redeem or to what? Reclaim you back to me. We call that redemption. Redeem you back to me. That's going to happen. And so every child that came into the world, Eve thought this is the one that's going to do that. No, that's been a long time ago. And so when these things were revealed, then they were kicked out of Edom in other words, there was a separation from the land as Jehovah had planned for them to the land for which they now were to inhabit. And so the separation from this garden, this utopia, was the result of sin. But Jehovah has a plan and said that Messiah, or the anointed one, would come. And now these people are from which the anointed one would come. So with that, that concludes our lesson for today. Let me get out of our shared screen. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you Wednesday night for chapter 15 in the book of Romans. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he have his face shine upon you and bring you peace. In the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, we pray. Amen. Shalom, and I will see you on Wednesday